today's special broadcast that comes to you from Strife-torn Ukraine. I'm Gaurav Sawant. On day 12 of battle in Irpin, the fighting is becoming extremely intense. During the course of the broadcast, India Today's biggest team of reporters on ground will get you the latest from every battle zone, from Kyiv to Kharkiv to Irpin to everywhere else where active conflict is taking place in Ukraine. You can hear the intensity of shelling behind me. These are multi-launch rocket systems that are going off in quick precision, in quick succession. They are firing. Intense artillery battles also being reported on either side. This is the road to Irpin. Now, at this checkpoint, as you can see, there are multiple levels of barricades and security personnel who are deployed here. Some who've already seen battle and some people who are trying to get away from the battle area. But beyond that, day 12 of the battle. What's been happening in Kharkiv, what's happening in Mykolaiv, what's happening in some of the other areas. India Today has the biggest team of reporters getting you facts on ground with this report.
A tale of two cities. Two cities which Russia wants but does not have yet. The battle for Kharkiv has gone on for at least a week now, and Ukrainians have refused to back off, leading to an all-out confrontation on the streets of Ukraine's second largest city. Ukraine claims a desperate Russia is now targeting civilian settlements. 8 people died in shelling after a sleepless night in Kharkiv. Residential buildings were engulfed in flames as people lost their homes, their everything in war. With the situation becoming more volatile in Kharkiv, tens of thousands of people gathered at the railway station, desperate to get out and keep their families safe. Meanwhile, this is how the capital city of Kyiv looks. With Russian troops edging closer and closer, the airstrikes continue unabated, leaving behind a trail of destruction on the streets of the capital. Unbelievable that this is how the beautiful, bustling city of Kyiv looked just 12 days before the conflict began in Ukraine.
More than 100,000 people crossed the border to Kyiv. It's all men that will fight for our country.
Governor, the attack, we are told, is happening at Hostomel, in Irpin, in Bucha. How much time, in your appreciation, before this part of Kiev where we are, how safe is this and how safe is this likely to remain?
It's very simple, never. Never.
We've shown you how so many civilians have decided to take up arms. Women who've never picked up a gun, now armed to the teeth to defend their country. They're all geared up.
You need a tremendous amount of training to be able to do this, to be able to hold a gun, to be able to wear this life jacket, this vest, this bulletproof vest, and the helmet, which is also pretty heavy, and then go into combat to fight for Ukraine against the Russians.
The all-out Russian offensive has led to a fight like no other for Ukraine's mega cities, and Russia claims Ukraine is responding by attacking rebel-held territories. A massive explosion rocked an oil depot in rebel-held Luhansk, Moscow claiming Ukrainian forces were behind the attack. 12 days on, the fight for Ukraine continues. Russia wants to get control of Kyiv and Kharkiv and reportedly hopes to end the fight by this weekend. But Ukraine has made it clear they will not go down without a solid fight. With Geeta Mohan in Kyiv, Bureau Report, India Today.
And even though war is on. Efforts are being made to bring peace. Russia declared ceasefire in Kiev, in Kharkiv, in Mariupol and in Sumy. And that's a shot in the arm for Indian students who've been stuck in the Kharkiv region and in Sumy. Let me now cut across to India Today's Geeta Mohan. Geeta Mohan will get us the latest on the diplomatic effort to bring peace in the strife-torn region.
Russia today declared ceasefire in 4 key cities of Ukraine: Kharkiv, Sumy, Mariupol and Kiev. This comes as a huge relief for India as it looks to evacuate Indian students stranded in these very cities just ahead of the conversation Prime Minister Narendra Modi had with his counterparts or heads of state of Ukraine and Russia.
On day 12 of invasion, amid raining missiles, rockets and shelling, a big Russian respite. A ceasefire coming into force in 4 embattled cities. Capital Kyiv, the southern port city of Mariupol, second largest city Kharkiv and Sumy. Russia said the respite will be for civilians who are awaiting evacuation. Russia also opened several humanitarian corridors in response to requests by French President Emmanuel Macron, who spoke to the Russian president. Russian forces said they are using drones to monitor the truce.
I hope that NATO will close the sky, and I hope that India, as India Prime Minister called to our president, will also be engaged in this process. And India is a great big country. Many Indians are in Ukraine. Many Ukrainians visit India. We have lots of connections and cultural things together, and we need to stay together, and I hope it will help us.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi dialed Zelensky and discussed evacuation of Indian nationals from Ukraine. The Ukraine president in his tweet appreciated Indian assistance. The Russian ceasefire is a massive boost to Indian efforts to evacuate stranded Indian students in the war zone.
बहुत ज़्यादा मतलब कह सकते हैं एक तरह से ख़त्म होने वाले हालात हैं। बंदा अगर रहेगा तो एक तरह से अपनी जान पूरी तरह से कुर्बान करने वाली चीज़ है, क्योंकि वहाँ पे कुछ नहीं बचा।
वहाँ पे जो हालात थे वो बहुत ज़्यादा ही ख़राब थे, क्योंकि हम लोगों को खाने पीने के लिए भी और किसी भी तरह की व्यवस्था नहीं थी, और वहाँ पे इवन फूड्स वगैरह सब कुछ खत्म हो गया था। हमें बंकर्स में रहने के लिए ही बोला गया था।
It also comes after Prime Minister Modi asked Putin to enforce a ceasefire to help in mission evacuation.
The main challenge remains the ongoing shelling there, ongoing violence there, and the lack of transportation. We are in touch with all concerned regarding possible movement. The best option for us would be a ceasefire, of course, that allows to get our students out. And in this connection, we have been strongly pressing both the Russian and the Ukrainian sides.
But many across the world and Ukrainian themselves are not buying the ceasefire at face value and pointing to how Moscow is notorious for flouting them.
Of course, it's good news. I mean, our hearts go out to the Indian students, but also to the Africans and whoever is there and civilian population. So there need to be a ceasefire. We have to get these people out, and we have to rescue their life. Now, only one person can do that, and that's President Putin.
No ceasefires Russia promised to do. No at all. The only one thing they was compromised from the last negotiations were humanitarian corridors only for a couple towns. And even though they didn't do their promise, the people were bombed, and the Russians used heavy shelling and heavy artillery.
Українці, сьогодні прощена неділя.
Instead of humanitarian corridors, they can only make bloody ones. Today, a family was killed in Irpin. A man, a woman, and 2 children.
Але сьогодні
right down the road, as in a shooting gallery.
Хто не згадав взагалі про цей день?
Do not trust any word of Russians. They lie all the time. So first we agreed about ceasefires for the humanitarian people, in giving possibility to go out of Mariupol and Kharkov and other city, and then they start shooting on civilians.
Putin has already said that his attacks will stop only if Ukraine drops resistance. So is this ceasefire a genuine humanitarian gesture or a brief lull before an assault of never-before scale to break Ukrainian resistance? With Geeta Mohan in Kyiv and Paulami Saha in Delhi, Bureau Report, India Today.
NATO countries can now send their fighter jets to Ukraine. Rajesh Pawar with details.
US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has said that NATO states have a go-ahead for supplying weapons and aircrafts to Ukraine. Zelensky has already said that this is a war for Europe's freedom. Many European countries are supplying weapons to Ukraine at this stage. Poland has announced that they will be supplying few MiG-29 aircrafts to Ukraine. What effect will all this supply of weapons to Ukraine will have on this war on ground? NATO has already refused to put boots on ground. Will the supply of these weapons to Ukraine will make any change to this war in Ukraine?
Could these fighter jets be headed for Ukrainian service? Could Soviet-era fighter jets in Poland's possession be the answer to Ukraine's crying need for additional air power to counter the Russian assault? The United States has announced that NATO countries have been given the green light if they choose to send fighter aircraft to Ukraine. But there are no takers yet among any US allies in the NATO. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken says talks are on with Poland for fighter aircraft for Ukraine. What this means is that if a decision is taken, Poland could supply aircraft, not fly it themselves, but train Ukrainian pilots to take those aircraft and use them against Russia. When it comes to air combat, Ukraine is no match for a far superior Russian air force. Outgunned, Ukraine has 67 fighter aircraft and is up against over 1,500 in service in Russia. Ukraine has only 34 attack helicopters and faces over 538 from the Russian invasion force. Poland was mulling providing old MiG-29s to Ukraine if compensated by modern US F-16s from Washington. But Poland is no longer ready to antagonize Putin by sending its jets to Kiev or let Ukrainians fly them. With the US itself developing cold feet over sending troops to rescue Ukraine, there's a slim chance of any US ally helping out Kyiv with jets for the foreseeable future. But more than finances, what Ukraine needs is anti-aircraft weapons, missiles, attack helicopters, and of course fighter aircraft. With NATO having no stomach to enforce a no-fly zone, Ukraine is desperate and feels a sense of betrayal.
There was a NATO summit, a weak summit, a confused summit. A summit where it was clear that not everyone considers the battle of Europe's freedom to be the #1 goal.
With the West, and most crucially the NATO staying away from the war theatres, the Ukrainians are virtually on their own against mighty Russia. With Abhishek Bhalla in Delhi, Bureau Report, India Today.
Now I hand you over to Sergei Miranko, who will take you through the other developments in Kyiv city.
Anti-war protests continue to rage across Russia. Over 4,000 protesters have been detained. Videos showed protests in Russia being dragged, beat and arrested.
Police detained more than 4,300 people across Russia on Sunday at protests against President Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine. That's according to an independent protest monitoring group, which said it had documented the detention of at least 4,366 people in 56 different cities across the country. Video obtained by Reuters showed dozens of protesters in Yekaterinburg being detained on Sunday, and one protester there was shown being beaten with a baton and kicked on the ground by police in riot gear. The video showed numerous protesters, some elderly, being escorted onto buses by security forces. Russia's Interior Ministry said earlier that police had detained around 3,500 people, including 1,700 in Moscow, 750 in St. Petersburg, and 1,061 in other cities. The Interior Ministry also said 5,200 people had taken part in the protests. Some Russian state-controlled media carried short reports about Sunday's protests, but they did not feature high in news bulletins. The last Russian protests with a similar number of arrests were in January of last year, when thousands demanded the release of opposition leader Alexei Navalny after he was arrested upon returning from Germany, where he had been recovering from being poisoned with a nerve agent. Navalny had called for anti-war protests on Sunday across Russia and the rest of the world. Protesters gathered at Parliament Square in London on Sunday and outside the White House in Washington, D.C., as well as in Mexico City, New Delhi, Istanbul, Budapest, Belgrade, and Brussels. And residents of some Ukrainian towns and cities occupied by Russian forces also took to the streets in protest.
Gita Mohan will now take you through the next story.
Soldiers of one of the tanks deployed in the border point of Kyiv city tied the knot. The ceremony was attended by the mayor. They were placed and have been placed at a checkpoint very close to the border of Kyiv.
As war in Ukraine unfolds, sights of widespread distress and trauma has dominated coverage over the last week and more. Amid this devastation, stories of couples finding love on the front lines has really won our hearts. This video shows a couple, Lesya and Valerie, who are volunteers from the 112th Battalion of the Kiev Special Troop Brigade, getting married amid all the chaos.
We decided to get married because we live in challenging times, and you never know what's going to happen to you tomorrow. That's why it is better to do it sooner than later.
After 20 years of being in a relationship and having an 18-year-old daughter, this couple decided to take the plunge amid war in their beloved country while they stand to protect their country.
We knew nothing about the war, even though people have been talking about it. We hoped it would not happen. We did not pay much attention to it, but now the wedding supports my spirit.
The couple was seen dressed in their military attire, the bride teaming her military uniform with a white veil, holding on to some flowers in one hand and her fiancé on the other. The military chaplain married them off while their whole team of frontline warriors rejoiced and sang for the couple as they took their nuptials. On similar lines, we saw another couple, Levets and Natalia Ladislav, getting married in a big bomb shelter in Odessa, Ukraine. The groom was seen wearing a uniform and the bride holding a bouquet. With millions of people being displaced amid the war, thousands being killed, these stories of love amid war is really winning hearts.
Well, that is all we have time for on this special broadcast from the active battle zone in Ukraine. From all the reporters here on Ground Zero, from our entire reporting team and from camera person Pawan Kumar and Mohsen, many thanks for watching. For all the latest news and updates, stay with us here on India Today.